Great, thank you. Well, I know many of you are very, very familiar with PBAs, and some of you may be newer to them. So um, last summer, Sarah, you may know Sarah, Sandine, and I worked with some others on implementing the new E1 PBA. And so today I'll talk about both the general PBA and the E1 PBA. Not go totally in depth on all the pieces of it, but I'll highlight some of the main points, and then we can go into questions. And we do have in-depth training on our site. So Sarah was going to put into the chat the the site for our community partner guide. In there is it's just a great resource as far as all things BA. So I'm going to share my screen and we can kind of walk through that site. Okay, good to go, Sarah or Anne. I can see you. Okay. All right. So this is the main site, the performance-based agreements, the PBAs. When you're on here, you'll see all the tabs. First one talks about milestone rates. You can see that general and E1 PBAs are similar in their milestone structure, with the difference being that 120 days of service for the E1 PBA milestone. So that was kind of a new concept for us, that 120 days of service. It's 120 days from the date of the signed placement plan. We added in an additional milestone. The intention there is that we thought that people entering into an E1 PBA may not have had competitive integrated employment. They may need more support. They may have more support needs. So it may take a little longer, or they may try a job and come back to job search. So it may take a little longer through that job search and getting used to their job and being. So that's the intent of that extra milestone in the E1 PBA. Otherwise, the processes are really similar, and you can see the payment structure there. Now, if somebody, this comes up a lot in the E1, especially in our economy, that people will get their placement plan done and they may find quickly. So if they hit that 9 days of successful employment, then the partner got the bill for the 120 day service. And we're just kind of adding that this year, just come across our 1 year mark of doing this, and we'll be running some data to see how often that's the case. We feel like it probably isn't most common, but we're going to look at some of that data and see if we need to make some changes in there. Let's see, then we go over in here, we talk about the services defined, placement and follow-up services. We kind of go into what that means, what does it look like? So placement services, we're all very familiar, helping someone find that job and connecting with those employers, and then follow-up equally is important once the person finds a job to support them to make it successful. And today I was perusing through the FAQs, and I see the community partnerships team is busy adding in a lot. There's some really great information in here. If you can't find an answer you're looking for, I know the community partner team always there as our placement specialists like me. But take a look in here. There was a lot of questions I hadn't seen before in there, so I was glad to see that. So also in here, we have our forms. All the updated forms are put in here, and as we make updates to them based on feedback, we update the forms in here. So this is always our go-to place for the forms. I like this. If you're not real familiar with how PBAs work, there's a good general overview of what PBAs look like. So the counselor works with that job seeker before you are involved as a placement professional. They work on a lot of pre-job search activities. So they're looking at criminal history as it relates. They're looking at skills, interests, conditions, all those things that go into developing that job goal and really identifying what kind of job and work culture that person might need to be successful on the job. Then you, the placement person, is invited to the team. We like to call it a team and an invitation instead of a referral or handoff, because we want the counselor, the placement professional, and that job seeker to really be a cohesive team with each having input into the process. Then we have our 60-day check-in that occurs 60 days after the signed placement plan. And then that will recur every 60 days until the person finds employment. So when we end that signed placement plan meeting, we set up that 60-day meeting right away. And then we like it to be in person. I know that's been a challenge. So virtually is great. We just don't want it to be like a quick, phone call, or a quick email. We'd like it to be a place where, all the progress is reviewed, looking at, does the job goal need to change? Is there additional supports we need to put in place? What can we do to get to that next step? And like I said, that recurs, so that at the end of that meeting, end of that 60-day check-in meeting, we're scheduling the next 60-day check-in meeting. If somebody finds a job, that's wonderful. We'll cancel that next 60-day meeting, and we'll hit then that second PBA milestone of the first day of employment. Then we're looking for our providers to let us know about the employment information. That's all on that monthly progress report, which we'll talk about. And then during that first 90 days of employment, we're looking for those regular check-ins with BRS, with the job seeker, of course. And then we hit that, hopefully hit that 90 days of successful employment. And so that third PBA milestone. All along the whole process, of course, we're looking at how can we support this person with accommodations, technology, they're disclosing their disability, and looking at just looking at the process to support them during their job. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of what the PBA looks like, the whole placement process. I'm going to go back. I think I have to stop the share. So that's the process. And then let's just kind of walk through the rest of the, whoops. As far as, okay. All right, so back to the forms, you'll see the sample employment application. The placement plan is in here. You can use our placement plan, or you can use your own organization's placement plan. We just ask that the same elements be on your placement plan as what we have on ours. So on ours, we have the job seeker role, the placement role, the placement professional role, and the counselor's role. And so we ask that all those roles kind of be laid out on that placement plan. The monthly progress report I talked about a little bit earlier. We look for that monthly progress report every month by the 10th of the month, from the time of the placement plan through the placement closure. So we're looking for those when we're paying milestones. We're looking to make sure that we've gotten them all. And we're looking for them, like for milestone 2, the employment details in that employment section. We're looking for that to be completed before we're paying milestone 2. And then we're making sure we have all of them at the end. And I know sometimes it can get away a little bit. Just try to get them into us by the 10th of the month. And like I said, we'll look to them when we get invoices. We have a job coaching report. Job coaching can be layered on top of the PBA. We used to have it bundled together, but we unbundled that last summer. So PBAs now, when needed, we would authorize for job coaching. So you'd need to be in contact with the counselor to get that job coaching authorized, and then submitting those job coaching reports in addition to the progress reports. So there's a sample report in there if you're interested in that. And then the closure considerations. So what needs to be in place to have that 90-day closure. Also in here, and I think Sarah put a link to this as well. This is the whole placement and follow-up services process. Sarah and I recorded this training that we did last summer when we launched the E1 PBA, and none of the information has changed yet, so it's still current. And it's great when you have new staff. It's only about 25-30 minutes, I think, long. It's a link to the YouTube video, and it just goes through that whole process for E1 PBA and general PBA. In here are the placement specialists. We've added a few, so I see we need to do a couple updates. So we'll be working on that, updating that page. But that's kind of the nuts and bolts. Any of us, you can call any of us about questions. Also the community partnership team. I'm just going to stop sharing now and go through just a couple other pieces. One of the big questions we've been getting about PBAs is how do you decide who goes into an E1 PBA versus a general PBA? And some people say, this person I anticipate will need more supports, but they're not on the waiver. Can they go into the E1 PBA? And the answer is no. We made it cut and dry so that people on waivers, on those Medicaid waivers, are automatically put into the E1 PBA, and everyone else goes into the general. That doesn't mean they don't, they're not going to be getting job coaching or more supports. It's just the way that we structured the system. And then just to reiterate, those monthly progress reports start with the placement plan meeting and they continue through closure. So
Thank you, Abby.
Yeah.
That's super helpful. We have lots of questions coming in about PBAs. Again, if people have questions, you can either post them in the chat or use the MS form. I will start with what's in the MS form, and Janine's going to moderate what's in the chat. So we'll go from there. But the first question in the MS form is that we received a referral for an E1 PBA. Do we meet with the counselor or do they send us the placement plan? The answer is that when you get a referral for a PBA, whether it's general PBA or E1 PBA, you should be having a meeting with your new placement team, which would be the job seeker, you as a community partner, and the referring counselor at a minimum. And then the three of you should meet and create the placement plan together at that first meeting. The second question I see in here, is it possible to get a printout of the information we're going over? To my knowledge, I don't think we have this information printed out for individuals. I think because we want to keep it live and accurate. So I would refer you over to our to the links of our website and follow the information from that. You can certainly pull down and as Evie said, if you want to use and save the version of the placement plan that we have or something like that. But we don't actually have like a hard copy printed packet. Would that be accurate, Abby?
Yep.
Okay. Let's see here. Is it possible to have examples of the PBA and monthly reporting shown in the billing Zoom group? I'm not exactly sure what the billing Zoom group is, so I might need a little bit more information. Can you explain how to bill for someone who uses waiver funding for services and the PBA milestones? When do you bill for the waiver and when do you bill for the PBA? Can waiver billing overlap or can it only be one or the other? I will answer part of that. I think that some of your questions, when they go to the county and to waiver funding, I would recommend that you use the Q&A that comes in with the Disability Hub. But when you're doing, when people go from engage, plan, find, and keep, BR is the find portion of that individual's employment journey. And so the only way that individuals who have individuals on waivers who have new plans as of September 1, 2021 or a renewed plan through the county is by having VR pay for that find piece. And so VR pays through the E1 PBA in that case. And so we have those 4 milestones. There is going to be a transition when that individual has secured employment. That milestone 2, that is going to be where you and the placement team are going to want to make sure that you're communicating with the county so that long-term supports can get put in place. But typically VR is going to see you through the E1 PBA 4 milestone phase and then move on to the county. And then let's see, how many hours before someone can ask for job coaching now compared to before?
I can answer that. Before, 20 hours used to be bundled into the PBA, and now 0 hours are bundled into the PBA. So if the person is in a PBA and needs job coaching, talk to the counselor about authorizing for those job coaching hours.
And then the next question is, we have found that we aren't able to get people into VR very quickly. How should we handle the situation when the wait is long and the person gets a job offer before they're able to connect with voc rehab services? I don't know the answer to that question. I believe that that individual could continue to stay with county funding because the piece that VR is mandated to fund is the finding of employment. So if that individual has employment, then VR funding would not be necessary. And then the counties, them in the county system they really wouldn't have to bounce back to VR. We do know that voc rehab services, we have a very specific application and eligibility process that we need to follow per our Rehab Service Administration regulations. And so it is recommended as soon as you are working with an individual on the waiver side and you are doing that engage. And once you get to plan, that planning phase is when an application for VRS is appropriate. So that while you're doing the planning, assuming that the individual is interested in competitive integrated employment, that as you're planning with them, you've also made the referral over to voc rehab services so that voc rehab services can start processing our application and eligibility paperwork. It is really important for voc rehab services. Again, a person has to be deemed eligible, and then we have to create what we call an employment plan before we can pay for or purchase services from any community partner.
Sarah, was that the final forms question? Perfect. This is Janine. So it's a nice segue into our first question from the chat. And just a friendly reminder, this Q&A can also just be live. So if you'd like to use the raised hand function, or as we get to a pause in the conversation, if you just want to come off mute and ask your question, please feel free. Otherwise, pop it in the chat and I will moderate those questions. So we had a very similar question. What happens when an E1MN person is ready for find, but VRS isn't able to open them in time because they're quickly offered a job? Again, like Sarah said, essentially you no longer need VR at that point. You can just move on with the county funding in order to do their long-term supports and help them keep that job. We are only mandated to do the find portion. And so if a person has kind of skipped ahead and found a job, which is very possible in our job market at this point, then you wouldn't need to connect with VR unless that person later loses the job or, wants to look for something different. Again, as Sarah shared, it's best practice in that engage, plan, find, and keep, that as soon as we get to plan, you are helping the individual to contact the local VR office. If you ever have a hard time getting a hold of someone to schedule an intake, which I know does happen for our partners sometimes or for our individuals, just reach out to one of the community partner program specialists. We are happy to help you get better information to that individual or support that individual so that they get connected to VRS. The next question that